Mega Man 1 through 6 are strong contenders for the greatest games ever made. That seems like high praise on the surface, but I think it's very justifiable. There was nothing else like them at the time. They paved the way for higher degrees of player choice, customization, visual fidelity, tighter controls, and even disregarding all that, they were still really fun games. I'd argue these were the best of their day, and still hold up great now. That's especially impressive if you know the history behind the Mega Man franchise. Capcom was a well-established developer by the mid-80s, having the likes of Street Fighter and 1942 under their belt. But these arcade-style games were the only ones they were making, and there was no denying the rising popularity of games like Super Mario, Zelda, and Castlevania, which were much more in-depth adventures. Capcom decided to tap into this market. They brought together a team of 6 people to do the task. 2 of them were Akira Kitamura and Keiji Inafune, the pair being the ones who conceptualized and brought to life the character and world of Mega Man. Rockman hit shelves in Japan on December 17, 1987, and later made its way to North America and Europe as Mega Man. In the distant future of 2000X, robots have become an average part of life, assisting mankind in any way possible. This is owed to the highly respected scientist Dr. Light. At a certain point, Light decided to create a robot with intelligence unlike anything the world had seen. I'll talk more about this when we get to Mega Man 3. For now, I'll say this project didn't end very well. Light wasn't going to give up so easily though, leading to the creation of the humanoid robots Rock and Roll. Mega Man has always incorporated musical references into the names of the characters, which is fitting considering the series is known for its great soundtracks. Rock and Roll have a nice brother-sister relationship, but that's showcased more in the later games. The NES ones aren't too heavy on the dialogue. Rock served as an assistant to Dr. Light, and Roll was a housekeeper. Light created 6 more humanoid robots to help out with certain jobs in the world. For example, Cutman was made to chop down trees. Another scientist and Light's former partner, Dr. Wily, emerged from the shadows. Having become so irritated by Light's success, he reprogrammed the 6 robots Light constructed and turned them evil. Rock volunteered to be converted into a super fighting robot to put an end to Wily and his scheme for world domination. And thus, Mega Man was born. A simple but effective story that leaves room for expansion, which, believe me, did happen. None of this is explained in the game itself, a common practice at the time, so I'm not docking any points. Upon pressing start, we're met with a level select screen consisting of 6 stages. Let's start simple. How's the level design? I think they nailed it. On their first try even. Timing is rewarded a lot here. More so than other action platformers at the time. Bomb Man stage is full of projectiles shooting out from bottomless pits and coming at you from the front that you need to time your jumps around. Cutman and Elecman stages showcase verticality, with enemies firing at you while making your way up a tower. The end of Cutman stage has you go back down it. Mega Man's drop speed is so high in this game that if you quickly jump off each ladder, you'll never get hit. Gutsman and Iceman are more platforming focused. You need to sync your jumps to whenever one of these platforms flop down. And these ones will shoot projectiles, so you gotta be cautious of that. Iceman stage is also the most notable use of disappearing blocks. These are a staple of the classic Mega Man games, and are definitely take it or leave it. I've never had a problem with them. I think they do a good job of shaking up the gameplay with some pattern memorization. It makes you feel pretty cool to get through it without falling. Fireman stage has you timing your jumps around beams of fire, and I really like the music here. Mega Man has always had fantastic music, and that really gets going with the next game, I'd say. This OST is the weakest of the 6 NES games in my eyes. It isn't quite up there with other games out at the time, but it's still good on its own. It's like an 8-bit interpretation of what you'd hear in a shonen anime. Back on topic, the level design is great. There's nothing I find poorly designed about it. Mega Man games have a reputation for being difficult, and this is true to an extent, but it's never felt unfair. Mega Man rewards players who've put in the effort to learn the levels, weapons, and bosses, knowing the most optimal order to play the stages in and how to use the weapons to their fullest potential is what defines these games. Some people don't take the time to do that, and these games are just not designed for casual play. You need to be willing to master them if you want to find the most enjoyment. If that approach isn't for you, that's fine, but don't act like it's the game's fault. That's all I'm saying. It's impressive to look back at these games and see how well they hold up compared to their competitors at the time. I enjoy the NES library, but there's no denying even its most popular titles are a bit hard to come back to if you're not used to their quirks. But Mega Man 1 through 6 don't have this problem at all, and the biggest reason would be smooth and responsive controls. The running, jumping, and hit detection all feel great, even today. There are a few blemishes, like the collision on this spike in Gutsman stage, and the controls are a tad bit slippery, but that sort of stuff was ironed out by Mega Man 3. Graphics are the only aspect of this game that were standard for the time. Nothing to get too excited about. It's still a nice looking game though. At least it's not hard to tell what something is supposed to be, which was an issue for a lot of games at the time. The 6 Robot Masters designs in this game are a good example of simple but effective. Their signature traits are on full display, like Iceman's fur coat, Fireman's furnace helmet, Cutman having a pair of scissors on his head, and Gutsman's perfection. Bomb Man looks like a Simpson though. I don't know what happened there. The boss designs are cool, but their battles are not so much. There are some okay ones like Cutman and Bomb Man, but then we get Fireman who just spams flames with no rhyme or reason, Elecman who kills you in 3 hits, and Iceman is pathetic with the slowest projectiles imaginable. So the bosses aren't great, but I'm willing to cut them a bit of slack because this was the first Mega Man game. And given all the bosses need to be weak to something, of course they couldn't get the balancing right the first go around. What they did nail on their first try though are the weapons. As I mentioned, each boss is weak to another's weapon. This allows you to make a few decisions. Maybe there's an annoying boss like Elecman, but the Thunder Beam is the best weapon in the game, so you'd want that as soon as possible. So, do you play Cutman stage first to get the rolling cutter to quickly defeat Elecman? Or do you pick Elecman first and master the boss with only the Mega Buster? Or how about going for Iceman first, because his weapon, the Ice Slasher, can freeze these enemies that can drain most of your health bar before a boss room. But Iceman stage has this challenging part with floating platforms that shoot at you. You can skip past it with the Magnet Beam, but that's found in Elecman stage and requires Gutsman's weapon to get. This is the foundation of why Mega Man is my favorite game franchise. An emphasis on player choice and game mastery. It's so satisfying to memorize the layouts of stages, knowing when and where a weapon will be most effective, and how to maximize efficiency to complete levels as quickly as possible. And of course, making sure you have the skills and tools needed to take on the upcoming boss. With all that said, we can now get into the endgame. All 6 Robot Masters have been taken down, and all that's left is to go after Dr. Wily. The first stage is great. It takes advantage of the full arsenal of weapons you now have, like having blocks that can only be destroyed with the Super Arm or Thunder Beam. The Fire Beams from Fireman stage make a return and can be frozen with the Ice Slasher. Iceman stage is paid homage to with these platforms coming back. This time it's harder to dodge them with the Magnet Beam due to the spikes lining the ceiling. A great stage overall. What's not great is the Yellow Devil boss fight at the end. This is one of the most infamous bosses in gaming history for a reason. It takes forever to be able to hit him, and once you can, you only have a 1-second window of opportunity. On top of that, he can attack you while he's invincible. That bad taste of a boss is thankfully washed out once we get to stage 2. Another great one. It's like a harder version of Bomb Man stage with nothing to shield you from the projectiles. I also like waiting for these enemies to get lined up, and then use the Thunder Beam to take them all out at once. That's pretty fun. One thing to note is that this stage has us refight some defeated Robot Masters, Cutman and Elecman specifically. If you're gonna do a boss rush, this is how I'd prefer it, spreading the bosses out like this instead of having me refight all of them in a row. But this game does do that with the last 4 bosses, so that sucks. Stage 3 is really short and easy, so I don't know why they didn't have you fight 2 other bosses here, and then the final stage would feature the last 2. The main boss of stage 2 is a copy of Mega Man who will use whatever weapon you're using. It's a pretty fun fight, even though you can cheese it with the Super Arm. Stage 3's boss is that. Despite the odd name, it's a lot of fun. You destroy multiple of these things that progressively travel faster after each one you defeat. What I do is use the Mega Buster on the first few, and then deal with the rest with blocks you can throw at them using the Super Arm. The final boss against Wily is split into two halves. The first is pretty easy, just hit him with the firestorm a few times. The second phase has spinning projectiles which can be hard to dodge, but soon enough, Wily will be defeated and Mega Man 1 will come to a close. I really like the ending theme. It's really peaceful and makes you reflect on the journey you just had. One that was truly special. Mega Man 1 was a bold game that pioneered so many things that we still see in gaming today, like non-linear mission structures, and a wide array of combat options. But it's also a fun and well-made experience that I could come back to any day and enjoy every second of it. Mega Man 2 and 3 have some annoyances, and 4, 5, and 6 are a lot longer than 1, so if I just want some quick action to pick up and play through, Mega Man 1 is always a great bet, and it will always come to mind when I think of my favorite games of all time. In terms of sales, Mega Man 1 wasn't much to write home about, making Capcom hesitant to greenlight a sequel. Akira Kitamura went to the vice president of Capcom requesting the go-ahead to make the game. An agreement was made to allow its production under the condition that the team would work on other projects as well. The dev team ended up spending their own time on it, aiming to improve on every aspect of the original and make it the best game it could possibly be. This game was a passion project in every sense, and it all paid off, because Mega Man 2 was a smash hit. It received rave reviews and was a big financial success. So much so that Mega Man 1 was reissued by popular demand. The story of Mega Man 2 is quite simple. After his defeat, Dr. Wily began constructing his own robots to fight Mega Man and take over the world. 1 year later, his plan is set into motion, and Mega Man springs into action once again. This is all presented with an opening cutscene, this being some of the most iconic imagery in gaming history. It's also a stark contrast to Mega Man 1, which just booted you right to a blank title screen. Before anything else, if you're playing the US version of this game, you'll notice two difficulty selections at the menu. Be sure to pick difficult. Normal mode was added to the US version out of fear that the game would be too hard for Western audiences. Normal mode makes this game a total joke, so definitely pick difficult. Anyway, Mega Man 2 is a textbook example of a perfect sequel. First off, there are 8 stages to choose from at the start, 2 more than the last game, and when you get into them, you'll notice a massive improvement on the visual presentation. Environments are a lot more colorful and detailed than the first games. Woodman has a forest in the background, Airman's got nice looking clouds, and Flashman's stage is frozen over, giving it a gorgeous crystallized look. Even things like health pickups and energy refills have been redesigned into something more stylized. The music has also been improved. The compositions are more complex and varied compared to what came before. The improvements really start to become apparent when you look at the level design. This game has a lot more interesting platforming challenges. The conveyor belts in Metal Man stage encourage strategic timing, Airman has enemies as platforms with spikes rising and retracting on top of them, and Bubble Man is an underwater stage which increases your jump height, making for tense platforming. Of course, you bring the best out of the levels when you're experimenting with the weapons. Flashman stage is a maze with paths that can be unlocked using the Crash Bomber to blow open walls. The Leaf Shield is great in Crashman stage. There's a lot of verticality here, along with these birds that drop eggs spawning a ton of smaller birds. The Leaf Shield will make you impervious to them. As for combat, I like using the air shooter on these mechs to take out their armor in one hit with a well-placed shot. Atomic Fire can be charged up for a bigger blast, feeling like a prototype for the charge shot that would come in Mega Man 4. But I have yet to address the elephant in the room, the Metal Blade. This weapon can be rapidly fired in 8 directions, uses barely any weapon energy, and is extremely powerful. I don't mind the Metal Blade, for the most part. It's a lot of fun to use, and I do think the other weapons stand on their own well enough to not be completely overshadowed by it. The air shooter can destroy these mechs, the Metal Blade cannot. The Flash Stopper can freeze time, and the Crash Bomber can blow open walls, both things the Metal Blade can't do. As for the rest of the weapons, I find my uses for them too, even if the Metal Blade is objectively better. However, all things considered, I do think this would have been a better game if the Metal Blade was less powerful, because it does devalue the other weapons. I can always just not use it, but the thing is, I have to go out of my way to do that. This isn't something that ruins the game for me, but it is a pretty big oversight. Just like Quickman's awful stage. I can play this level fine now, but I remember getting so frustrated when I first played it on the Legacy Collection. This level sucks. There's a cool part with this enemy that makes the room go dark when it's defeated, but then the whole rest of it is just a barrage of instant kill lasers that you need to dodge with pinpoint accuracy. Thankfully, it's made easier with the flash stopper, or half of it at least, since it doesn't last the whole way. Quickman's boss is also really annoying. He just aimlessly jumps around and shoots at you. But I do think the other bosses are pretty good. Metal Man and Bubble Man have some fun pattern recognition. Airman shoots tornadoes that you need to maneuver around as they push you backwards. Flashman will freeze time to attack you, but if you know when to jump, you can avoid getting hit. Overall, these bosses are a sizable improvement over the first game. By now, you can tell that Mega Man 2 expanded upon every aspect of the original. On top of all that, the game added some new things to the mix. You can find E-tanks hidden throughout the stages. You can carry 4 of them and they instantly refill your health bar upon use. They're pretty handy and give you something to search for in the levels. There's also a password system to save your game. You just gotta write it down somewhere after finishing a level. The most notable new addition would be the number items. Item 1, 2, and 3 are obtained after beating Heatman, Airman, and Flashman respectively. These are here to help you traverse through the levels. Item 1 creates up to 3 floating platforms, Item 2 is a jet that sends you flying forward, and Item 3 clings to walls and lifts you up them. This could have been cool and made for more strategic stage routing, but I didn't find any good use for these in the main 8 stages outside of this part of Heatman stage where I use Item 2 to skip past the awful disappearing block section. Up to this point, Mega Man 2 has remained a great game, in spite of its issues I've gone into, so you'd hope the endgame would keep up that momentum. Mega Man 1's Wily stages were great and took advantage of all the weapons perfectly. These weapons are even better than that game's, so these levels should have been an easy home run, but unfortunately they weren't. This game was the introduction of the castle stages. Dr. Wily has constructed a castle that you must go through 4 levels of in order to get to him. I think the spectacle is great. The first stage has you infiltrating the castle, and as you get deeper into it, the colors get more drab. But then stage 4 has this eerie shade of purple. I like the aesthetics of these levels, but they're pretty disappointing to play. I guess they wanted to make up for the lack of number item usage in the first 8 stages, because you'll be using them constantly here, and I just don't think they're that fun. Pull yourself up walls, jump across pits, and fly in a straight line. That's as deep as it gets. There are some cool moments, like using the flash stopper to hold up these drills, using the leaf shield to protect you during these on-rails platform sections, or scoping out fake platforms with the bubble lead. These are pretty interesting uses of these weapons. I just wish we got more of that, instead of being forced to use the number items. These levels aren't bad or anything, they just could have been more interesting. On the flip side, I think the boss fights here are pretty cool. The Mecha Dragon chases you for a bit, and you have to jump across these blocks to run away. It's pretty easy to take down once the fight actually begins, but the spectacle is nice nonetheless. The boss in stage 2 is called the Pico Pico Master. It makes up this room you're trapped in. 2 blocks will break from the walls, combine together, and chase after you. They get faster each time. It's a really tense and fun fight. But what kind of setup is this? Mega Man games have the weirdest enemies, and we will see more of that in the coming games. Believe me. You also fight a Gutsman tank. Best character in the game if you ask me. The Boo Beam trap is one of the most infamous parts of the Mega Man series, and I can see why. The crash bombs need to have a full energy meter, or else this boss is unbeatable. No exaggeration. So if you happened to use any and didn't refill before the boss, you're screwed and have to get a game over to try again. But it's also one of those things where once you know it, you know it. I actually think it's a fun boss, but it shouldn't have required max crash bombs. With that, we've reached the final stage and are greeted to my least favorite Mega-like trope, a boss rush. Fight the same 8 bosses you just fought 20 minutes ago. There's no reason for this to exist. I beat these bosses, I saw them blow up. Why are they still here? You have all their weaknesses, so it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's still really unnecessary. The fight against Wily is more of the same from Mega Man 1. He's in a capsule shooting projectiles. Once you break the capsule, the second phase begins. But unlike the first game, The battle isn't over quite yet. There's one more stage in the depths of the castle. I really like the atmosphere. There's no music, just the sound of acid dripping from the ceiling. After venturing into a dark room, Wily reveals himself to have been an alien the whole time. This fight is pretty cool. He flies around the room shooting at you, and his weakness is the bubble lead, something you need to get up close to hit him with. It's a cool dynamic. Once we take him out, it's revealed that the whole battleground was an illusion, and Wily isn't an alien after all. And thus, Mega Man's journey has come to a close. With no one else is left to fight, he journeys through the seasons, trying to find a new purpose. It eventually becomes clear to him that the only thing left to do is to leave his old self behind, and step into this new world of everlasting peace. Mega Man 2 is a fantastic sequel all throughout. It took Mega Man 1's foundation and expanded upon every aspect. I can't help but smile at the passion and ambition that shines through all of it. For a while, Mega Man 2 was considered the best game in the series by most people. This happened because around the time NES nostalgia reached its peak, internet discussion on video games was becoming more and more common, with platforms like YouTube beginning to catch on. Mega Man 2 was the best-selling game in the series until only recently, when Mega Man 11 surpassed it. So it's the entry most people have nostalgia for, and that was heightened during the NES nostalgia boom, leading many people to go online and sing the praises of the perfection that is Mega Man 2. In recent years, the game has received more criticism, as we no longer live in a gaming culture dominated by nostalgia for the 8-bit era. And with the legacy collections making these games more accessible than ever, it only makes sense that a game like Mega Man 2, which was touted as perfect for years, would be criticized. Is Mega Man 2 a better game than 4, 5, and 6? Probably not, but I don't think it's fair to throw it under the bus because it's not perfect. What it did was the basis for every other Mega Man game that followed it to varying degrees. Mega Man 1 introduced the formula, and Mega Man 2 expanded upon it. All we need now is a game to perfect the formula. Of course, Mega Man 2 would receive a follow-up given its success. The foundation for a perfect Mega Man game was right there. The flaws just needed to be ironed out. This could have been an easy task if it wasn't for how disastrous the development cycle was. Akira Kitamura left Capcom before work on the game began, and he was replaced with someone who didn't understand Mega Man, according to Keiji Inafune. The last 2 months of development were incredibly hectic, with it getting very hard for the team to meet deadlines. Ultimately, Mega Man 3 was put to market before the dev team felt it was ready. This fact is obvious from the moment the game begins. There's no flashy opening cutscene establishing the story this time. Instead, you're greeted to a black title screen with the main theme playing. The Japanese version featured Mega Man on the right side of the screen, but the US version took that out, likely because he had too much of an anime look to him, which clashed with the way these games were portrayed here. But they forgot to reposition the text to reflect this change, so it's awkwardly shifted to the left. The most prominent example of this lack of polish would be the slowdown. This was present in the last 2 games, but it wasn't nearly as constant as this one. The gameplay chugs in many bizarre areas due to poor optimization, like whenever these bees pop up in Hardman stage, or these enemies in Topman and Sparkman's levels. The lack of context for the game's plot is especially unfortunate considering this story is definitely the most interesting so far. Dr. Wily has seemingly given up his evil ways and works with Dr. Light on a peacekeeping robot named Gamma. They need 8 energy elements scattered throughout different planets. They created 8 robots to search for the elements, but all of them mysteriously went crazy. This leads Mega Man and his new robo-dog Rush to set out for the planets and recover the energy elements. It has a lot of cool concepts, like Wily changing his ways, and the new planets as the game's setting, but you can't grasp any of that while playing because it's never explained. Thankfully, the level design of the main 8 stages wasn't affected by the troubled development, because it's really good. Sparkman has electrical barriers that you need to time your jumps around, as well as platforms that'll launch you upwards into spikes, so you gotta be quick about getting across. Gemini Man has these eggs with tadpole-like enemies in them that you need to pop to get through. The lights in Shadow Man stage go out periodically, so you need to carefully maneuver around that. I think these 8 stages are the best we've seen so far, with a ton of fun and unique platforming and obstacles. They also really embraced the fact that these levels take place on other planets by giving them a ton of bizarre features. Like, Snake Man's level is constructed entirely out of snakes that shoot at you, and then you fight giant ones. Or Gemini Man's stage I mentioned earlier with its alien eggs. I'd say the bosses are the best of the first 3 games. Magnet Man shoots magnets from above that come raining down on you, and Spark Man charges up a ball of electricity to hit you, and his terrain is uneven, so you need to be careful of that. The bosses are alright overall, nothing too special, as the next 3 games definitely have this one beat in that category, but still, these ones are okay. I thought the weapons were really lame though. The magnet missile is my favorite one. It locks onto enemies on the ground or ceiling, so it's pretty useful. The hard knuckle is very powerful, so it's good for mini bosses. Nothing else though, because it's really slow. The others are just bland or flat out awful. The Shadow Blade is the Metal Blade, but way worse. In theory, it could have been an improvement by being more balanced, but you can't spam them, so they're no fun to use. And the travel time is so slow that you'll barely hit any targets. The Gemini laser can only be fired once and bounces around for 5 seconds if you miss a shot. But the top spin takes the crown home for the worst weapon in Mega Man history. It makes you spin in the air like a moron, and then you need to jump into an enemy to damage them, and it's a complete toss-up of if it'll even do anything. It's really disappointing to see how badly they messed up the weapon roster here. That's one of the main things that draws me into Mega Man, so if you can't get that right, that's a problem. This game did have some cool additions though, most notably the slide ability, which allows you to slide across the floor for a burst in movement speed. Needleman's stage uses this to great effect by having you dodge these retracting spikes. It's a nice feature and helps to speed up the gameplay. This was also the introduction of the Robo-Dog Rush. He takes the place of the number items from Mega Man 2. The coil is pretty useful. It lets you jump really high to reach certain areas, but the jet is broken. You can fly around freely and fire at enemies. You could potentially skip entire chunks of stages effortlessly with this. On the flip side, the Marine is only used once in Gemini Man's stage, and even then, there's another path you can take that doesn't require it. The rush tools would be ironed out and expanded upon in later games, but as it stands, the coil is fine, but the other 2 either need to be omitted or reworked. Throughout the 8 stages, you'll come across this guy called Brakeman, or at least that's who we think he is. In actuality, this is Proto Man, the first robot with complex intellect constructed by Dr. Light. It was discovered that his energy core was defective and would cause him to stop functioning. Light wanted to fix this, but Proto Man feared doing so would change his personality, so he fled. When his core eventually depleted, he was found by Dr. Wily and repaired. This is how Wily learned to construct robots on par with what Light could make. Proto Man is my favorite character in the classic series. He's independent and a good mentor for Mega Man. Not that you can grasp any of this while playing the game though, there's zero context. Up to this point, Mega Man 3 has been a decent game. The level design is the best we've seen so far, bosses are okay, and at least the magnet missile is a fun weapon. This all goes out the window with the Doc Robot stages. You revisit Spark Man, Needle Man, Gemini Man, and Shadow Man stages to face off against a guy called the Doc Robot. Despite using the same aesthetics outside of Needle Man's level now taking place at night, the level design is largely different. It's mostly made up of remixed assets from the original stage, but there are some new gimmicks like these rotating gears in Sparkman stage, or this part of Needleman stage that's entirely dedicated to the Rush Jet. I just think a lot of these new gimmicks would have been better off incorporated into the Wily stages, because as it stands, these levels are boring and exhausting. I already played through the features of these levels, so remixing them doesn't do anything for me. You also fight the Doc Robot 2 times per stage. His patterns are throwbacks to Mega Man 2, but they're so sped up that it's near impossible to dodge them. These levels are completely unnecessary, and that's all I've got to say about them. We've reached the endgame and are only now getting the first cutscene. Dr. Light informs Mega Man that Wily ran off with Gamma and the elements, so we better go after him. The Wily stages are fine. The only weapon I found useful in them was the Hard Knuckle, because it blows up these walls. But I'm not as bothered by this as I was in Mega Man 2, because the weapons in this game are no fun anyway. Wily Stage 2 has some fun reaction-based platforming with these platforms returning from Hardman Stage. Stage 3 brings back the light gimmick from Shadowman Stage. And I guess the magnet missile could be useful here to destroy the enemies that shut the lights off. The boss fights are pretty fun. The first one has you fight turtles with underwater physics, and the second brings back the Yellow Devil, only this time the hitbox stays open for much longer. It's cool how they went back and redeemed a terrible boss like this. The track that plays in stages 3 and 4 is incredible. It's very melancholic, and sells the impossible odds of going after a robot as powerful as Gamma. This game's music utilizes much lower pitches compared to Mega Man 2. I found a comment on Mega Man 3's opening theme one time, It was something along the lines of 2's theme representing being a hero when it's fun, and 3's theme is when things get tough. That's a good way to describe both of these soundtracks. The boss rush returns, it still sucks, and this is the last time I'm gonna talk about it except for the few games that actually tried spicing it up. Wily Machine 3 is an okay fight. It tries something different than the previous two when having you slide under it to get a better angle, but it turns out this Wily was a fake, and the real one still awaits with Gamma. And this is one of the worst bosses in the series. You jump up to this platform and fire hard knuckles at him for like 15 seconds and then you win. In one of the most hilarious cases of irony, the top spin, a weapon that was a total liability for 99% of the game, can now suddenly take out this ultra-powerful robot in one hit. I've had enough of this, let's get to the ending. Wily's castle is collapsing, but Proto Man rushes in to save Mega Man. It seems it's already too late for Wily, so he meets his end for good. The ending sequence is one of my favorites. Mega Man runs through a field, while the nameplates of Dr. Light's first humanoid robots scroll at the bottom, ending with Proto Man's. Mega Man looks off into the sky and spots a constellation of Proto Man. I really like the theme here. It's the sound of Proto Man's signature whistle with some extra notes mixed in. It's really relaxing and feels like Proto Man's way of telling Mega Man he'll always be there for him from now on. Mega Man 3 is not a bad game, but it's clearly unfinished. For every cool idea it has, it shoots itself in the foot with something else. It's still a game I enjoy playing, but one that I don't come back to as often as the other 5 NES games. It suffers from issues those ones don't, like lackluster weapons and too much filler. I'm comfortable saying I like Mega Man 3, but nothing more, and it's definitely my least favorite of the NES titles. But analyzing perfection isn't the point here. I can save that for the 4, 5, and 6 review. What I wanted to get across was just how groundbreaking these first 3 games were. Mega Man 1 opened the floodgates for open-ended game design, and Mega Man 2 expanded upon that formula. Mega Man 3 stumbled, but given how awful its development was, it's shocking how it turned out to be even a decent game. I have my issues with Mega Man 2 and 3, and the first game suffers from its simple presentation compared to later titles, but none of that matters much to me, because what these games did for the industry means so much more than that. These will always be some of my favorite games of all time, of course along with 4, 5, and 6, but that's a story for another day. Thanks for sticking around until the end, it really means a lot, and I hope to see you next time.